David had always thought that the universe was vast and unpredictable. As a soldier stationed on a distant alien world, he had seen many strange things, but nothing like this. It was late afternoon when he first spotted them. Two young alien women, clearly in distress, standing by the edge of a thick forest. David's job was to protect the human colony on the planet and keep the peace between the locals and the settlers. His missions were usually straightforward: patrol the area, make sure no one got too close to the human settlements, and report any signs of danger. But today was different. Today, he was about to meet two beings who would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The twins were strange-looking by human standards, their bodies slender and delicate, their skin pale with an almost translucent quality. Their faces were angular, with large eyes that glowed faintly in the dimming light, and long, flowing hair that shimmered in shades of blue and silver. They looked fragile, and their clothes, simple, torn fabric, spoke of a hard journey. David couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for them. They looked lost, hungry, and scared. Without a second thought, he approached cautiously, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his blaster. He had to be careful. The twins weren't human, and this was still an unknown planet with unpredictable risks. But something about their posture, the way they seemed to shrink back at his approach yet didn't run, told him they weren't a threat. "Hey, are you okay?" David called out gently, his voice low, trying not to startle them. The twins looked at him with wide, confused eyes. They didn't speak at first. They simply stared, as if unsure what to make of him. David could see their eyes flicker down to the food pouch strapped to his side, the one he always carried with him on patrol. It was a simple bag of rations, nothing special, but it was food. He knew they were hungry. David had always been a firm believer in helping others no matter their background. It was something his parents had taught him growing up. And though he wasn't sure who these twins were, he wasn't going to turn his back on them now. He opened the pouch slowly, pulling out a small wrapped ration bar. He held it out toward them, offering it without hesitation. "Here, you must be hungry. Take it." The twins exchanged a glance, then slowly approached him, their movements tentative. One of them, the taller twin with striking silver hair, reached out with a shaky hand. David placed the bar in her hand, and she stared at it for a moment before breaking it open. She sniffed it, as though uncertain about what it was. The other twin, who had shorter hair and pale blue skin, watched closely, her eyes still filled with suspicion. David smiled reassuringly. "It's just food. We call it a ration bar. It's nothing fancy, but it'll fill you up." The twins finally took a bite, their expressions unreadable. They chewed in silence, glancing up at David every now and then, as though they were studying him. David sat back on a large rock, watching them closely. He had no idea where they came from or what had brought them to this part of the planet. He only knew they were hungry and scared. After a few moments, the taller twin spoke, her voice soft and melodic, though it was tinged with a noticeable accent that David couldn't quite place. "Thank you, human." David nodded. "You're welcome. I'm David." He hesitated before asking, "Are you two from around here?" The shorter twin shook her head slightly. "No, we are lost." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but David could hear the sadness in it. "We don't know this world. Our kind. We don't survive well here." David frowned. The twins seemed like they were in desperate need of help. He had no idea who they were, but they weren't from the nearby alien tribes. That much was clear. And given their frailty, they were unlikely to last long on their own in the wilds of this harsh world. "You're not from the nearby settlements, are you?" David asked. The taller twin, Kira, looked at him with uncertainty. "No, we are from another world," David nodded slowly. understanding dawning. These twins weren't like the other species he'd encountered. They were strangers to this planet, and they had no idea how to survive here. "Well," David said, standing up and adjusting his blaster, "you're safe now. You're not alone. I'll take you back to the human settlement. We have food, shelter, and you'll be able to get the help you need." The twins exchanged another glance, and David noticed how their expressions softened. They seemed relieved, but there was something else too, something he couldn't quite place. They were looking at him like he was more than just a soldier, or a protector. They looked at him like he was their lifeline, and that feeling, subtle yet powerful, made David pause for a moment. "Thank you, David," Kira said, her voice a little stronger now. "We are grateful." David offered them a small smile. "I'll get you both back home. You're safe now. Just stay close." As they began walking together, David couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning. Something in the way the twins looked at him made his heart skip a beat. They weren't just looking for food and shelter, they were looking for something deeper, and he couldn't quite understand what that was yet. But as they moved through the forest, with the fading light casting long shadows around them, David couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. He had no idea that this small act of kindness would lead to a series of events that would change everything, both for him and for the twins. Something told him their journey together was just beginning. David led the twins through the dense forest, careful to keep his pace steady for them to follow. The sun had nearly set, casting long, jagged shadows over the ground. The air was cooler now, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the afternoon. It had been a long day, but David couldn't help but feel a deep sense of purpose as he walked beside the twins. They were quiet now, no longer the fragile strangers they had been earlier, but something deeper was growing between them. David had encountered many different species during his time as a soldier, but he had never met anyone quite like Kira and Lena. Their wide, glowing eyes seemed to be taking in every little detail of the world around them, absorbing it like they were seeing it for the first time. The twins' movements were still tentative, but they were beginning to adapt to the strange human world. They walked closely together, their steps synchronized, as though they had always done everything in unison. David couldn't help but notice how much they relied on each other. "How are you feeling?" David asked, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, a hint of concern slipping through. He wasn't sure if they even understood the question fully, but he figured it wouldn't hurt to ask. Kira glanced up at him, the pale glow of her eyes flickering in the dim light. "We feel strange," she admitted, her voice soft and uncertain. "We have never been far from home. This world is different." David nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine. It's a lot to take in." He was trying to make them feel at ease, though the reality of the situation had started to weigh on him. The twins were clearly not from this planet, and they had no idea how to survive here. How could they have survived on their own for so long? "I don't understand," Lena spoke up suddenly, her voice filled with confusion. "We are hungry, yes, but what is this? The food you gave us, it tasted different." David smiled, trying not to laugh. "It's a human ration bar. Not exactly a gourmet meal, but it gets the job done. I guess your species doesn't eat the same things we do." Kira turned to look at her sister, and David noticed the quiet exchange between them. The bond the twins shared was clear. They communicated with just a glance, understanding each other without words. It was a kind of connection David couldn't fully grasp. He was used to human relationships, where everything was spoken aloud, but these two had a silent understanding, a shared language of their own. They continued walking in silence for a few more minutes, and as they neared the edge of the forest, the faint glow of the human settlement came into view. The distant lights twinkled like stars on the horizon, offering a sense of safety in the vast, unknown world. David paused for a moment, and turned to look at the twins. "You two ready for your new home?" he asked, his voice warm with reassurance. Kira and Lena exchanged another look. "Home?" Kira asked slowly, her voice still unsure. David nodded, gesturing toward the settlement. "Yeah, that's where we'll be staying. It's not much, but it's safe, and you won't be alone anymore." Lena hesitated. "What about you?" David blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Lena pointed at him, her finger trembling slightly. Are you going to stay with us?" Her question was direct, but there was an innocence in it that caught David off guard. The twins had already come to rely on him in ways that went beyond the simple need for food or shelter. They were looking to him for something more, something deeper. David opened his mouth to respond, but stopped himself. The twins had only just met him, and already they were looking to him as a protector, someone who would provide for them. He wasn't sure what to make of their sudden attachment, but it was impossible to ignore. "I'll stay with you as long as you need me," David said finally, offering them a small smile. "But don't worry. I'll get you the help you need. The people in the settlement are friendly. They'll take care of you." Kira's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than was comfortable. "And you will be there?" she asked quietly. "Will you always be with us?" David felt a strange sensation in his chest, a tightness he couldn't explain. The twins weren't just grateful for his help, they were starting to see him as something more. He could feel it in the way they looked at him, the way they depended on his presence. It was almost as though they had never known anyone who truly cared for them before. "I'll always be around," David promised, though he wasn't entirely sure what that would mean in the long run. He wasn't sure what they were asking of him, or if he could give it to them. As they reached the outskirts of the settlement, David noticed the curious looks of the other humans nearby. He had never seen anyone quite like the twins, and their appearance was drawing attention. He didn't blame the others for being curious. These were beings from another world, after all. But David wasn't concerned with the stares. His main focus was on getting Kira and Lena settled and figuring out what to do next. The humans in the settlement had always been accepting of new allies, especially if they were allies against the alien tribes that had once been a threat. But David knew that the twins weren't like the other species they'd encountered. They were different, and that difference would likely raise questions. He turned to Kira and Lena, who were looking up at him expectantly. "We're almost there. Stay close to me, okay?" Kira nodded, her eyes never leaving him. "We will." As they entered the settlement, the peaceful hum of life around them felt surreal. Humans went about their daily routines, unaware of the new arrivals. David was determined to keep it that way, at least for now. He didn't want to make a scene. He just wanted to get the twins settled and figure out what they needed. But the more time he spent with Kira and Lena, the more he realized something was happening between them. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something more complicated. They were starting to form a bond with him, one that was more than just one of survival. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, David couldn't help but wonder where this connection would lead. As they walked further into the settlement, David found himself glancing over his shoulder at the twins, wondering what the future would hold for them all. Something told him this was only the beginning of their journey together. The next few days passed in a blur for David. He had led Kira and Lena to the human settlement, where they were introduced to the small community that had come together to build a new life on this alien planet. The settlement wasn't much, but it was safe. The people there were used to strange occurrences, having already dealt with many species from different worlds. But there was something different about Kira and Lena. The twins were quiet, observant, and always together, as if they didn't quite know how to exist in this human world without each other. David noticed how they looked to him for guidance, how they leaned on him for comfort in moments when the unfamiliarity of their new surroundings overwhelmed them. It was clear that they trusted him, perhaps more than they trusted anyone else. David had done his best to show them around, introducing them to the human way of life. They seemed fascinated by the most mundane things, like the sight of the humans using simple tools or the way they ate their meals. Everything was new to Kira and Lena, and they soaked up every detail. David found himself explaining the most. Basic concepts. How food was prepared, how homes were built, and what the stars in the sky meant. They listened intently, hanging on every word he said. But it wasn't just the twins' curiosity that David noticed. It was the way they looked at him. Kira, especially, often caught his gaze and held it a little longer than necessary, as though searching for something in his eyes. There was an intensity to her attention, a quiet longing that made David uneasy, though he couldn't quite explain why. The more time he spent with them, the more he began to see a bond growing between the twins and himself. They followed him everywhere. During the day, they would walk with him through the settlement, learning the ways of the humans. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, listening to his stories of Earth and the distant lands he had visited. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, the twins sat beside David by the fire, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames. David had just finished explaining a story about Earth's ancient history when Kira spoke up, her voice soft, but full of curiosity. "David," she began, her eyes never leaving him, "you have told us much about your world. But tell us more about yourself. What makes you human?" David raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. It wasn't something he often thought about, not in the way Kira was asking. "What do you mean?" Kira shifted closer to him, her gaze still intense. "You are different. You care for us. You have given us food and shelter, and you protect us. But why? Why do humans help others when they don't have to?" David thought for a moment. He had never been asked such a direct question. He had always believed that helping others was just part of being human, something his parents had instilled in him when he was young. But now, with Kira and Lena watching, him so intently, he felt the weight of her question more than ever. "I guess I help because it's the right thing to do," David replied, his voice thoughtful. "It's how I was raised. My parents taught me that. No matter where you are or who you're with, you should always help others if you can. It's about doing what's right, not because you expect something in return, but because it makes the world better." Kira nodded slowly, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand the complexity of human kindness. "And you do not expect anything from us?" David shook his head, his heart heavy with the weight of the question. "No, I don't expect anything. I just want to help you both find your way here." Lena, who had been quiet up until now, suddenly spoke, her voice soft but sincere. "But we want to give something back to you, David. We want to be with you." David was taken aback by her words. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. The twins had grown attached to him, and he had known it, but hearing them express it so plainly left him feeling uncertain. It wasn't that he didn't care for them. He did, in a way that was both protector and friend. But the idea of their attachment to him being something more than that made him uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" David asked, his voice gentle. Kira spoke this time, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "We are alone here. You have shown us kindness when no one else did. We are grateful, David. We feel connected to you. You are more than just a protector to us. You are something we need. We want to stay close to you." David's heart raced. He could see the sincerity in their eyes, the raw emotion in their words. He had never been in a situation like this before. The twins weren't just grateful, they were forming a bond with him that went beyond anything he had expected. And though he cared for them deeply, the thought of their dependence on him frightened him. What were they expecting from him? He didn't know how to answer their unspoken plea. I don't know what to say, David admitted, his voice heavy with confusion. I care about you both, but I can't promise you something I'm not sure I can give. Lena reached out and gently touched his arm, her fingers light but insistent. You have already given us something, David. You have given us hope. Hope that we can belong somewhere, that we are not just strangers in this world, and that to us means everything. David looked at the twins, the weight of their words settling over him. He had known they were beginning to form an attachment to him, but he hadn't realized the depth of it. Kira and Lena weren't just looking for shelter, they were looking for a sense of belonging. They saw something in him that made them feel safe, and they wanted more of it. But what did that mean for him? What was he supposed to do with this bond that was quickly growing between them? David didn't have the answers. He only knew that. He couldn't turn his back on them now. They were relying on him in a way he hadn't expected, and he couldn't just walk away from it. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, and David took a deep breath. I don't know what the future holds, he said quietly, but I promise I'll always be here for you. I'll help you find your place here, and I'll protect you. The twins smiled softly, their eyes filled with a warmth that made David's heart ache. They were grateful, and they cared for him. And even though David wasn't sure what all of this meant, he knew one thing for sure. They had become a part of his world, and he couldn't imagine leaving them behind. The days continued to pass quietly in the settlement. David's routine had become somewhat predictable. He woke early in the morning, patrolled the area, and spent time with Kira and Lena, showing them the ways of human life. The twins were settling in, though their need for David's presence seemed to grow with each passing day. They followed him wherever he went, rarely leaving his side. David didn't mind. He had grown fond of the twins, their quiet companionship making the long, lonely days of his assignment seem more bearable. But as their bond deepened, so did the questions he had about his place in their lives. They depended on him in ways he didn't quite understand, and it made him uneasy. One evening, as David sat by the fire with the twins, the atmosphere was different. The air was still, the sounds of the settlement fading into the background as the fire crackled. Kira and Lena sat across from him, their expressions serious, their eyes fixed on him with an intensity he hadn't seen before. David looked up from the fire and met Kira's gaze. "What's on your mind?" he asked, sensing that something was about to change. Kira opened her mouth to speak, but then hesitated as if weighing her words carefully. "David," Kira began, her voice soft but filled with an unmistakable urgency. We need to tell you something." David straightened, sensing the gravity in her tone. "What is it?" Lena, who had been quietly sitting beside her sister, spoke next, her voice shaky but determined. "We have been thinking about our time here. With you. We want to say something that's been growing in our hearts since the moment we met you." David's heart skipped a beat. He had a sinking feeling he knew where this was headed, but he kept his thoughts to himself, allowing them to speak. "You've done so much for us," Kira continued, her eyes never leaving his. "You've shown us kindness when no one else would. You've kept us safe, fed us, and taught us how to survive here. But there is something more we need to ask from you. Something we don't understand fully, but it's there." David felt a knot form in his stomach. He had a feeling this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "What is it, Kira?" Lena looked at her sister, then back at David. We don't understand how to feel about it, but we know it's true. We feel connected to you in ways we've never felt before, not just as someone who helped us survive, but as someone we want to stay close to. She faltered for a moment, unsure how to continue. Kira placed a hand on her sister's arm, offering her comfort. Then she turned back to David. David, we want to stay with you. We don't just want your protection or your help. We want to be with you in every way. We have never known a connection like this before, and though we don't understand it fully, we cannot ignore it. David's breath caught in his throat. He had known the twins were growing attached to him, but hearing them speak so plainly about their feelings was overwhelming. He wasn't sure how to respond. This wasn't something he had ever expected to hear from two people he had only recently met. But their sincerity was undeniable. I don't know what to say, David said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. I care about you both. You've become important to me too, but this is complicated. I'm human, and you're not. You're from a different world. I can't promise you something I'm not sure I can give. Kira's eyes softened, her expression filled with a mixture of understanding and sadness. We don't ask for promises, David. We just want you to know how we feel. We want you to know that we don't just need you for survival. We need you for something more, something we can't explain. Lena nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. We want to be with you, David. Not because we have to, but because we want to. We've never known love like this. Not from our own kind, and not from anyone else. You are the only one who has ever shown us care like this. David stared into the fire, his thoughts racing. He had never considered that the twins might see him as something more than a protector. They had become a part of his life in ways he hadn't expected, and now they were asking for something deeper. But how could he give them what they wanted when he didn't fully understand it himself? I can't give you what you're asking for, David said, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't even know what you want from me. I don't want to hurt you, but I don't know how to be what you're asking for. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Kira and Lena didn't move. Their gazes locked on David, as though waiting for him to say something that would make everything clear. But David didn't have the answers they needed. He didn't know how to navigate this situation. He cared for them, deeply, but the idea of their feelings for him being something more than gratitude left him feeling lost. Finally, Kira spoke, her voice soft but resolute. We don't need you to be something you're not, David. We don't need you to change. We just need you to understand that we care for you, and we want to be with you in whatever way we can. David's heart ached at her words. He had never imagined that helping someone could lead to such a deep connection, and though he wasn't sure what the future held, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn his back on them. They had placed their trust in him, and that trust had become something far more meaningful than just survival. I'll always be here for you, David said finally, his voice filled with sincerity. I care for both of you. I'll help you find your place here, and I'll protect you. But I can't promise you more than that, not right now. The twins nodded, their faces softening with relief. They didn't expect more than what he had given them, but for now, it was enough. They had confessed their feelings, and though David hadn't given them the answer they had hoped for, he had shown them something just as important. He cared. As they sat in the silence that followed, David couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him and the twins. He didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a soldier protecting two strangers. He was something more to them. And though he didn't understand the full extent of it, he knew he couldn't walk away from that connection. The days following the twins' confession were filled with a strange tension. David had done his best to carry on with his routine, but now the unspoken feelings between him and the twins were always present, lingering in the background. They had made their emotions known, and David had responded as honestly as he could, but that didn't mean everything was clear. The twins had come to depend on him in ways he hadn't anticipated, and now he found himself caught between his growing affection for them and his own uncertainty about what he could truly offer. David continued to care for Kira and Lena. He showed them more of the human settlement, helping them interact with the people, teaching them basic customs, and making sure they were comfortable. The twins, for their part, adapted quickly to the new world around them. They were intelligent, learning things faster than David expected. They were no longer the frightened, hungry beings he had found in the forest. They had become more confident, more sure of their place in the settlement. But as much as they had adapted, one thing was clear: they still needed him. They followed him everywhere, and their gaze never seemed to stray too far from him. The connection they had formed with him was undeniable. It was a bond that had grown quickly and intensely, and it was beginning to make David uncomfortable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the settlement, David sat with the twins by the fire. The air was cool, and the fire crackled in front of them, providing a welcome warmth. The peaceful setting felt at odds with the turmoil David had been feeling inside. Kira and Lena sat close to him, as they always did now, and David couldn't help but notice how their presence seemed to fill the space around him. They were no longer just two strangers he had found in the forest. They were part of his world now, and as much as he cared for them, he couldn't ignore the growing complexity of their relationship. David took a deep breath, glancing at the twins. "I need to talk to you both about something," he began, his voice steady but serious. The twins turned to him, their eyes focused, waiting for him to continue. "We've been spending a lot of time together, and I've noticed that, well, things have changed between us," David said, trying to find the right words. "You both have become very important to me, and I care for you deeply, but I think we need to talk about what happens next. Things are complicated." Kira looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "What do you mean, David? We are not human. We understand that, but we also understand that what we feel for you is real, and we want to be close to you. You have become a part of us in ways we cannot explain." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, and I don't want to hurt you, but I'm not sure what I can give you. I care about you, both of you, but I'm human. Our worlds are so different. I'm not sure how we can move forward with all of this." Lena's voice broke through the silence. "But you are here with us. You are already a part of our lives. Isn't that enough?" David paused, trying to process her words. "It's not that simple. I want to help you both. I want to make sure you're safe and that you're comfortable here. But this attachment you feel for me, it's more than just gratitude, and I'm not sure if I'm capable of giving you what you're asking for." Kira reached out and placed a hand on David's arm, her touch gentle but firm. "We do not ask for anything from you that you cannot give. We just want to be with you in the way that feels right. We understand the differences between us, David, but that does not change how we feel." David met her gaze, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had never been in a situation like this before. He was used to clear lines and boundaries, but with Kira and Lena, everything felt blurred. They had come into his life so quickly, and now they were a part of it in ways he hadn't expected. Their bond with him was growing stronger by the day, and he didn't know how to navigate the emotions that were starting to overwhelm him. "I don't want to hurt you," David said, softly. "But I need to figure out what all of this means. I care about you, Kira, Lena. I really do. But I don't know what the future holds. I don't even know what I can offer you in return." Lena looked down at her hands, her voice quieter now. "We don't want to pressure you, David. We just want you to know that we are not just asking for something. We are offering something in return. We want to build a future here with you, together." David's heart skipped a beat. What did they mean by that? He wasn't sure if they were speaking of something romantic or simply a deep bond formed through mutual care. But whatever it was, he knew it was more than he was prepared for. He had never expected to form such a deep connection with the twins. They were from a different world, with different customs and beliefs. Their expectations of him were not something he had ever considered, and now he was caught in the middle of it all. "I can't promise you that, not yet," David said quietly. "I can't promise you anything, but I will always be here for you. I will protect you, and I'll help you find your place here. We'll figure it out, but it's going to take time." Kira and Lena nodded, though their faces remained serious. They understood his hesitations, but it didn't make their feelings any less real. They had come to depend on David in ways that went beyond survival. They trusted him, and they wanted to stay close to him. As the fire flickered between them, David could feel the weight of the twins' words pressing down on him. He cared for them, but the future was uncertain. They had come into his life so suddenly, and now their attachment to him had become more than he could easily process. He didn't know what he was supposed to do with these feelings they had for him. All he knew was that he couldn't turn his back on them. They had placed their trust in him, and he couldn't ignore that. David looked at the twins, his heart full of conflicting emotions. "We'll take it one day at a time," he said finally. "That's all we can do. But no matter what happens, I won't leave you. I'll always be here." Kira and Lena smiled softly, their expressions filled with a quiet relief. They didn't expect more from him than what he had already given. For now, that was enough. As the fire crackled in the silence, David couldn't help but wonder what the future held. There was so much he didn't understand about the twins and their feelings. But one thing was clear. They had become a part of his world, and no matter how complicated things got, he wasn't ready to walk away from them. The weeks that followed were filled with both challenges and small victories. David had grown accustomed to having Kira and Lena by his side every day. The twins were not just dependent on him for survival anymore. They had become an integral part of his life. Their presence had changed the way he viewed the world around him. They had brought a new sense of purpose to his life, and though he was still uncertain about where everything was headed, he couldn't deny the bond they had formed. The settlement had started to accept the twins, and the people were curious, but respectful. The twins' appearance was still a bit of a mystery to the humans. They were unlike any species they had encountered before, but they had proven to be quick learners, adapting to the human way of life with remarkable ease. They spent their days helping out where they could, learning new skills, and becoming more confident in their new home. Still, the connection between them and David was undeniable, and that bond seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. David couldn't help but notice the way the twins looked at him. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something that made him feel both proud and uncomfortable at the same time. Kira, in particular, seemed to look at him with a longing that David didn't fully understand. He didn't know what to make of it. But he knew one thing for sure. The twins weren't just looking for protection. They were looking for something more. And though David cared for them deeply, he wasn't sure what he could offer them beyond what he already had. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the settlement, David and the twins sat on a small hill overlooking the area. It had become a routine for them, this quiet moment of peace before the evening chores began. The twins had become skilled at working with the other settlers, helping with building, gathering food, and learning new human customs. But this moment, sitting together in silence, had become their own. Kira and Lena sat beside him, their eyes fixed on the distant horizon, as if lost in thought. David glanced at them, sensing that something was different today. They had been more distant lately, and though they still followed him everywhere, there was an air of uncertainty about them that David couldn't ignore. Kira, Lena, David said softly, breaking the silence. Is everything okay? The twins turned to look at him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was Kira who broke the silence, her voice quiet but firm. We have been thinking a lot, she began, about our future here, about what we want, and what you want. David felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had known this moment was coming. He had known the twins were growing restless, unsure of their place in the settlement, unsure of their place in his life. He had hoped that the time they spent together would help them find their way, but now it seemed that they were searching for something more, something David wasn't sure he could give them. What do you mean? David asked, his voice steady. Though his heart raced, Lena spoke this time, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. We have learned so much from you, David. You have shown us kindness, and you have made us feel safe. But we are not human. We know that. And while we are grateful for everything you have done for us, we are not sure how to move forward. We don't want to be a burden to you, and we don't want to hold you back. David's heart ached at Lena's words. He had never thought of them as a burden. In fact, he had grown to care for them more than he had ever expected. But now, as they spoke, he realized that their feelings were more complicated than he had imagined. You're not a burden, David said softly, his voice full of emotion. I care about both of you more than you know. You're not holding me back, but I'm not sure what to do. We come from different worlds, Kira, Lena. We have different ways of thinking, different ways of living. I want to help you find your place here, but I can't promise you anything beyond that. Kira looked down at her hands, her face filled with a quiet sadness. We know, David. We understand that you can't promise us the future we want. But that doesn't mean we don't want to try. We have always been taught that survival is the most important thing. But now, we have learned something different. We have learned that connection, love, is just as important. David felt his heart sink. He had never expected the twins to express their feelings so openly, but here they were, asking for something that went beyond friendship, beyond survival. They were asking for a connection that David wasn't sure he could give. I care for you both, David said, his voice thick with emotion. But I don't know if I'm capable of what you're asking for. I don't know what the future holds. I'm just trying to help you make a life here. That's all I can offer. Lena reached out and gently touched his arm. And that is enough, David. We don't need you to change. We just need you to be here, to be with us. David swallowed hard, trying to process everything they had just said. It wasn't easy for him to accept their feelings. He had never been in a situation like this before, and he didn't know how to respond. But one thing was clear. He couldn't walk away from the twins. They had become a part of his life, and no matter how complicated things became, he couldn't abandon them. Okay, David said softly. I'll be here, for as long as you need me. Kira and Lena smiled, their expressions filled with relief. They didn't expect anything more from him. For now, just his presence was enough. And though David didn't have all the answers, he knew that he couldn't let go of the bond they had formed. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the settlement, David looked at the twins. They had come so far in such a short time, and though he didn't know where their journey would take them, he knew one thing for certain. They had become a part of his world, and for better or worse, they were his responsibility now. Together, they sat in silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. It was the beginning of a new chapter for them all, one full of uncertainty, but also full of hope. David didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while he felt ready to face it.